Her name was Chloe Bennett. She was 32 years old, a single mother who worked as a freelance landscape architect. That evening, in the middle of Christmas dinner, her mother set her silver fork down on the plate and declared that the two children should lose their winter trip so they could learn what it meant to make sacrifices. The dining room glowed beneath warm yellow lights, yet the air felt colder than the snow outside the windows. 10-year-old Leo sat perfectly still. 8-year-old Maya lowered her head and stared at the mashed potatoes that had already gone cold. They had just heard their Aunt Victoria announce that, during the upcoming family trip, the two of them would have to give the attic bedroom to their cousins and sleep on the pull-out couch in the living room. Victoria spoke as though the decision required no discussion. She boasted that her own children always knew how to obey and accept less for the sake of the family. Chloe set down her glass of water. She explained that Leo needed a quiet place to sleep and use his astronomy camera, while Maya was extremely sensitive to noise. Chloe was not asking for special treatment. She only wanted to keep the room she had paid for. Beatrice curled her lip. She called it indulgence. She said Chloe was turning the children into selfish, fragile people. To her, a good child was one who stayed silent, while adults arranged the course of that child's life. Thomas, Chloe's father, struck his wine glass against the table. The sharp sound made Maya flinch. He demanded that Chloe cancel the $15,000 trip to teach the children a lesson about family values. He believed he was defending discipline. In truth, he was only defending the authority he had held for years. An old memory came rushing back. When Chloe was 9, she had been forced to give her bedroom to Victoria and sleep on a thin mattress beside the storage room. When she cried, her mother told her not to be dramatic. When she protested, her father said the family could only remain peaceful when the reasonable person agreed to step aside. After that came the hand-me-down clothes, the birthdays combined with someone else's, and the wishes that always came after Victoria's needs. Chloe had grown up by making herself smaller so that the house would not explode, and now that same cycle was crawling toward Leo and Maya. Motherhood guilt tightened around her chest. Chloe wondered whether she had been too soft with her children. Then she saw Leo quietly remove the memory card from his camera. Maya whispered that she could sleep on the floor. Something inside Chloe broke completely at those words. She stood up. She did not shout. She did not argue. She simply said that her children would not pay the price for the comfort of adults. Beatrice's face went pale. Thomas clenched his jaw. Victoria laughed, convinced that Chloe would eventually give in again. What they did not know was that Chloe was no longer the invisible girl she had once been. The money for the trip came from a major resort design project she had recently completed without telling them. The woman they considered unstable was actually holding a contract substantial enough to change the course of her entire financial year. That night, Chloe opened the booking page for the family trip. Her finger hovered over the cancel button. She thought about generational trauma, about the parenting boundaries she had once been too afraid to establish, and about the price of continuing to remain silent. Then she canceled it, but not so they could stay home. Chloe closed the page for the family's cheap cabin and began searching for a destination no one could possibly imagine. Outside, the snow kept falling. Leo and Maya were asleep. And for the first time in years, Chloe did not feel as though she was abandoning her family. She felt as though she was saving the family that was truly hers. 3 days later, while Beatrice still believed Chloe was at home reflecting on her mistakes, Chloe and her 2 children were standing in the middle of Helsinki airport with 3 suitcases dotted with melting snow and tickets that would take them straight to Lapland. Before boarding, Chloe sent a brief message to the family group chat. "I canceled the shared cabin trip. You were right, Mom. The children need to learn a lesson." Victoria replied almost immediately. She sent a string of triumphant congratulations, as though Chloe had finally admitted that she was wrong. Beatrice wrote that sometimes a mother had to be firm, even when it disappointed her children. Thomas sent only a brief acknowledgement. In his mind, the old order had been restored. No one asked where Chloe and the children were. Leo sat beside the airport window, clutching the backpack that held his camera. He tried to appear calm, but his eyes kept drifting toward the flight information board. Maya still believed they would return home after spending one night at a hotel near the airport. Chloe had not told the children their final destination. She wanted that moment to belong only to them, untouched by anyone's judgment. As the plane descended, rows of snow-covered pine trees emerged beneath the gray clouds. The final light of the day reflected across the white ground, making all of Lapland look like another world hidden from the rest of the earth. Leo was the first to see the welcome sign at the airport. He froze. Then he turned toward his mother, his lips parted but no sound came out. Maya slowly read each word, then wrapped her arms around Chloe so tightly that her wool scarf slipped to one side. She asked whether this was really their trip. Chloe nodded. Leo lowered his face and pretended to check the zipper on his backpack, but tears had already fallen onto the back of his hand. They continued their journey aboard a train that carried them through a vast white landscape. Outside the window, the small wooden houses gradually disappeared, giving way to deep forests and silent hills. Chloe watched her children press their faces to the glass. For the first time since Christmas dinner, Leo's shoulders were no longer tense. Maya laughed loudly without immediately looking around to see whether her happiness had bothered anyone. The resort stood alone on a mountainside, where the final road vanished beneath thick snow. Their glass cabin in Lapland was unlike anything the children had ever seen. A transparent glass dome curved over the bedroom and opened directly onto the northern sky. Each child had a private room, a large bed, a window facing the pine forest, and a kind of silence that no one had the right to take away. Leo immediately set up his camera tripod on the balcony. He measured the angle of the sky, checked the batteries, and cleaned the lens with such concentration that Chloe smiled. Maya ran around the room, touched the ski outfit that had been prepared for her, and cried out as though she had discovered treasure. But when Chloe saw the skis standing beside the door, her left hand went cold. When she was 7, Thomas had dragged her to a slope meant for adults. He said fear was only weakness that needed to be defeated. Beatrice had stood below, urging Chloe not to embarrass the family. Chloe had fallen, broken her arm, and lain in the snow, choking on her tears. For years afterward, whenever she heard the sound of ski blades cutting across the ice, she felt the old pain travel down her arm. The next morning, Maya took a lesson with a local instructor on a gentle slope. No one forced her to go faster. No one laughed when she fell. The instructor knelt beside her and asked whether she was ready to stand again. Watching from behind the barrier, Chloe realized that the thing she had feared had never truly been the snow. It was the feeling that she had no right to say no. Maya turned and called for her mother. Leo raised his camera, ready to capture the moment. Chloe stepped into the practice area, her legs trembling violently. She fell on her very first attempt, and snow sprayed across her coat. No one blamed her. Maya rushed over and took her mother's hand. Leo laughed, but there was no mockery in it. The instructor only asked whether she wanted to try again. Chloe stood up. On her second attempt, she managed to glide several feet. It was not far. It was not perfect, but it was enough to open an old door inside her. Surrounded by the silent white beauty of the winter landscape, Chloe understood that a healing journey was not about forgetting what had happened. It was about returning to the place where fear had begun, but this time having the right to choose her own pace. That evening, the three of them lay beneath the glass roof, waiting for the northern lights to appear. Leo pointed his camera toward the sky. Maya fell asleep beside her mother. Chloe studied her reflection in the glass and realized that this trip was not only a gift for her children, it was the first declaration that her small family would no longer live by rules written in fear. On their 4th night in Lapland, Leo captured a photograph that left the entire cabin silent. The northern lights stretched across the sky like a pair of enormous wings opening in the darkness. Ribbons of green light curved above the snow-covered pine forest, and at the center of the frame was a patch of white light shaped exactly like a bird rising into flight. Leo stared at the camera screen for a long time. He did not cheer. He did not run off to show anyone. He simply gripped the camera tightly, as though he feared the moment would disappear if he moved too quickly. Chloe stood behind her son and felt her throat tighten. She did not see the selfish child Beatrice had described. She saw a boy who was free to focus on what he loved, a boy who only needed enough space for his quiet talent to step into the light. The next morning, Chloe posted the photograph on her social media page with a short caption. Sometimes, giving a child a space of their own is how you allow them to paint their own sky. At first, the post received only a few compliments from friends and colleagues, but less than an hour later, Victoria called, not to ask how Leo had taken the picture. She wanted to know how much the cabin had cost. Victoria had found the resort's website. She read every price, then added the cost of the flights, the snow train, and the skiing services. In Victoria's mind, every moment of Chloe's happiness had to be explained as a personal insult. Messages began pouring in one after another. Chloe was accused of spending irresponsibly. She was told that she had taken money from the children's education funds just to show off online. She was asked how a single mother could possibly justify such a luxurious trip. Then the phone rang again. Beatrice. Her voice was cold from the very first sentence. She said Chloe was destroying Leo and Maya's future. She called the trip a cheap act of rebellion wrapped in luxury. According to her, children who were indulged with private rooms and personal interests would eventually grow into ungrateful people. Thomas was somewhere beside her, saying nothing. His silence made Beatrice bolder. He still believed he was merely avoiding conflict. In reality, every time he remained silent, he gave more power to the person creating it. Chloe stood beside the glass wall. Outside, Leo was adjusting his tripod. Maya was drawing rows of snow-covered pine trees in her new sketchbook. Chloe was no longer trembling as she had during Christmas dinner. Very slowly, she said that not a single dollar from the trip had come from her children's education funds. Beatrice fell silent for several seconds. Chloe continued. She was a freelance landscape architect. The resort project she had recently completed had brought in the largest income of her career. She had spent months managing the client, creating the designs, making revisions, and supervising construction remotely. The trip had been paid for by the very abilities her family had always dismissed. The woman they called unstable had a client list longer than Victoria's company had ever possessed. That was the truth they had never wanted to see. Beatrice immediately changed her argument. She said the issue was not money. The issue was Chloe's attitude. But Chloe understood that tactic well. When her mother could no longer control her through shame, she turned to morality. When morality failed, she invoked family. Chloe told her plainly that they were not angry because the trip was expensive. They were angry because she had made a decision without asking permission. The other end of the line went silent. Chloe continued, saying they could not accept that she was no longer the child who could easily be forced to surrender her room, her clothes, and even her voice. They called her selfish only because, for the first time, she refused to make herself smaller so other people could feel comfortable. Beatrice began raising her voice. Chloe ended the call. No further explanation. No apology. That afternoon, an unexpected email arrived for Leo. It had been written by the curator of a local art exhibition in Rovaniemi. Leo's photograph of the Northern Lights had been shared in a winter photography group and had caught their attention. They wanted to purchase the rights to use the image for a limited edition postcard collection. The offer was $5,000. Leo read the number 3 times, then looked at his mother, unable to believe that a photograph he had taken could be worth so much. Chloe did not say that this was proof they could use against the family. She simply placed a hand on her son's shoulder and told him that talent grows best when it is not forced to ask permission to exist. That evening, Leo signed his name on his first agreement. Maya sat beside him and seriously asked whether she could design the backs of the postcards someday. Chloe looked at her children and understood the true meaning of breaking family patterns. It was not about winning an argument. It was about creating a home where children did not have to trade away who they were in order to be loved. Outside the glass wall, the Northern Lights appeared again. This time, Chloe did not think about the people back home who were angry with her. She thought only of the vast sky above her children. 3 weeks after returning from Lapland, Chloe received a message that made her think she had read it incorrectly. Victoria wanted to meet her alone, without Beatrice, without Thomas, and especially without any argument about the trip. By then, Chloe's home had gradually settled back into its normal rhythm. Leo's photograph of the Northern Lights had been printed on the first postcards in Rovaniemi. He used part of the $5,000 to buy a new lens. while the rest was deposited into a savings account in his name. Maya hung her painting of the snowy pine forest beside her desk and told all her friends that her mother had stood up again after every fall on the ski slope. Chloe did not tell the children about the cold phone calls that followed the trip. Beatrice still sent messages written in the language of concern, but every sentence concealed a judgment. Thomas never apologized. He only asked whether Leo had really received the money, as though a passion only had value once a number proved it. The only person who made Chloe smile was Julian. Her younger brother wrote that she had done what all of them had once wanted to do, but had never been brave enough to attempt. He admitted that for years, every time Beatrice forced Chloe to give something up, he knew it was unfair. But he had stayed silent because he was afraid of becoming the next person pushed outside. The confession did not completely heal the old wounds. But it helped Chloe understand that silence was not always agreement. Sometimes it was simply another form of fear. She agreed to meet Victoria at a small coffee shop far from their parents' house. Victoria arrived late. She wore no elaborate makeup and none of the expensive clothes she usually used to make other people feel inferior. She sat down, both hands wrapped tightly around her coffee cup, but she did not drink. For the first few minutes, neither of them spoke. Victoria was the one who finally broke the silence. She admitted that she had lied. Her children had never willingly made the sacrifices she had boasted about during Christmas dinner. They had cried. Her older son had once begged to remain home alone rather than keep joining trips where every decision was made by Beatrice. Her younger daughter often suffered stomachaches before family gatherings because she was afraid of doing something wrong. Victoria had seen all of it, but she had chosen to call it discipline. She had spent her entire life trying to become the perfect daughter. Every achievement, every outfit, and every family dinner had been part of a performance designed to preserve her mother's approval. She had once believed that she was loved more than Chloe. Now she understood that she had only been rewarded because she obeyed more effectively. Chloe's trip had not angered her because of the money. It had angered her because Chloe had done what Victoria had never dared to do. She had stepped out of her assigned role. Chloe looked at her sister. In that moment, she no longer saw the woman who had laughed when Chloe was forced to surrender her room. She saw another child who had grown up in the same house and had simply learned a different way to survive, but understanding did not erase responsibility. Chloe said she was willing to listen, but she would not return to their old way of living. The decisions concerning Leo and Maya belonged to her. No one would be allowed to insult them, pressure them, or use family affection to force the children to sacrifice their sense of safety. Victoria nodded. For the first time, she did not argue. After the meeting, Victoria began with small changes. She allowed her children to refuse a family gathering. She canceled a trip Beatrice had arranged without asking. When her mother became angry, Victoria did not call Chloe and blame her. She faced that anger herself. Beatrice said Chloe had destroyed the family. But after years of silence, Thomas finally said something that left the entire room still. Maybe this family was already broken before Chloe dared to say no. No one knew whether it was an apology or simply a truth that had arrived too late. Chloe did not need to decide immediately. She had learned that healing did not mean opening the door and allowing everyone to walk inside. Healing meant choosing for herself who was allowed to stand at the threshold. That evening, Chloe watched Leo carefully clean his new lens. Maya was attaching her drawing of the snowy forest to the wall with strips of colored tape. The two children argued over which postcard was the most beautiful, then burst into laughter. Chloe stood in the middle of the small room, without a glass roof and without the northern lights, yet for the first time, the space felt larger than any resort. She understood that parenting boundaries were not walls built to punish other people. They were doors built to protect the people inside. And breaking family patterns did not begin with a great battle. It began at the moment a mother saw fear in her children's eyes and decided that the cycle would end with her. Sometimes, saying no is not an act of selfishness. It is the first step toward protecting the people you love and ending patterns that should never be passed down. What do you think about Chloe's decision? Was she right to stand against her family, or did she take things too far? Share your opinion in the comments, especially if you have ever had to set boundaries with someone close to you. If this story moved you, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications for more powerful family drama stories about courage, healing, betrayal, and emotional justice.